Hey, what's up everybody? Today we are going to be reacting to another video. This is a slightly different video than we normally react to. The channel is a really popular one, Psych2Go. As of this point, they have maybe 12 point something million subscribers. So a really big channel talking about mental health and psychology in everyday life and questions that people might have about psychology. But this one really caught my eye because I've been reading books about behavior analysis recently. And so the title of this video is 6 Psychology Tricks to Read Anyone Instantly. And now that caught my eye because, like I said, I've been reading books by FBI behavior analysts, and this is one of them right now that I'm working through, Sizing People Up. And so I'm curious about comparing and contrasting the methods that Psych2Go offers versus what the FBI agents offer as how to read people. Now, this author here for Sizing People Up, Robin Dreeke, isn't claiming to be able to read people, but being able to predict behavior. Not that you can necessarily control it, but that when you can predict what someone might do, then you can kind of plan around that. So I don't know exactly what direction Psych2Go is going to go with their tips, but so I'm going to be interested in the compare and contrast. Now, I already come into this a little skeptical because of the idea of reading anyone instantly, that people are so contextual that even though we have patterns of behavior and speaking and thinking, that's not always readily apparent just from being able to instantly clock someone and recognize what they're up to, what their motivations are, what their values are. So I'm curious how they're going to suggest that. Before we get into it, please do like and subscribe. That helps the channel to continue to grow. And let's see what suggestions they have.
Hey Psych2Goers, welcome back to our channel. Have you ever wanted to know what someone is feeling or what they meant to say based on their clothing, expressions, or behaviors alone?
Clothing, expressions, behaviors. Okay, that's really interesting. I've got some thoughts based on some of the reading that I've done and what they've said already. But just being able to know what someone's intending to say, I think clothing is something that you can manipulate, something that someone can be intentional about being deceptive with. And the body language is always an interesting one to kind of dive into. So let's see what they suggest for us.
Maybe you've seen too many episodes of Sherlock, and so now you're determined to become a detective yourself. While no one can read another's mind, not even Sherlock Holmes is that good, there are some tricks that can help you get a better understanding of others and what they really mean to say. Here are some tips on how to read nearly anyone.
Okay, so I think they're specifying specifically what someone is trying to communicate. So I think that's a helpful clarification, not that you're going to read anyone instantly and be able to dig through all of the layers of meaning of what their motivations and what their actions are going to be, but maybe being able to decipher what their intended message is through some of these tricks. I think that's more doable.
Number 1, be open-minded and unbiased. If you want to learn to read people, you must first practice approaching people with an open mind. We all have hidden biases within us based on past experiences, current emotions, and interactions.
And this is something that the FBI behavior analyst talks about as well. We have a lot of unconscious biases based on what somebody's wearing, based on how they speak, based on the kind of work that they're in. And sometimes these biases can cloud our judgment about who the person actually is or what they're actually trying to say. So this is really applicable when it comes to my counseling sessions. If I see a teenager who looks like they haven't slept all night, who doesn't look like they've maybe showered in a couple of days, and are just looking really not well kept, there are certain assumptions that I might bring into that session before I know them at all, and I might speak to them a certain way, or I might imagine certain things about them. And so it's really important for me, or for anyone who wants to be able to better understand people, to approach people with an open mind and not let those assumptions get in the way, either positive or negative assumptions, because those tend to cloud our judgment about who that person actually is and what they're actually about.
If we judge someone too quickly, we're more prone to misreading others. Practice entering a new encounter with an open mind. According to Judith Orloff, MD in Psychology Today, you must surrender to other vital forms of information so that you can learn to read the important nonverbal intuitive cues that people give off. To do this, you must also be willing to surrender any preconceptions.
So what she's talking about is confirmation bias. If I think I know something about a person, I will look for evidence to back up my assumption. And so if I can surrender that and be able to come in with an open mind, then I can let the data that I'm getting about what they say, what they're doing, what they're wearing, how they're behaving, I can let that inform my conclusions instead of having a foregone conclusion and looking for evidence to back that up. That's really important when it comes to how we trust people. And another book by Dr. Mary Ellen O'Toole, who was also with the FBI, she talks about how we constantly misjudge people because we assume something about someone based on how they present, what work they're in, and that's actually not a really good way to judge somebody's character.
Or emotional baggage, such as old resentments or ego clashes that stop you from seeing someone clearly. The key is to remain objective and receive information neutrally without distorting it. Number 2, enter open-minded, but be aware of your instinctive feelings. While it's best to be open-minded, it may not be a good idea to ignore our gut feelings and first impressions entirely right away. Why? Our first impressions may be more accurate than we think, according to research published in the Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin in 2009. The study had subjects view full body photos of 123 strangers. The strangers were viewed in either a controlled, neutral pose and facial expression, or the strangers naturally posed themselves in an expressive pose. When the subjects saw the photos of the strangers expressing themselves naturally, their judgments of them were correct for 9 out of 10 personality traits.
Okay, that's interesting. So let's look at some of these personality traits. Extroversion, agreeableness, emotional stability. The reason I'm digging into this a little more is because the FBI authors are very clear. Don't just go by your gut instinct. And I think they gave a little caveat too. Don't rely solely on your gut feel for people. And just a simple example of this is that people with some personality disorders like narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, they can all come off as very charming and very friendly and agreeable the first time you meet them. And if we go too hard by our gut instinct, then that can set us up to trust people who are really not trustworthy in the first place. And so in the book that I'm reading, what they offer is a system for being able to test whether someone is trustworthy. And their basic assumption is both simple and complex in the sense that expect people to always look out for their own best interests. And so then they outline their system for, okay, how do you know what they believe their best interest to be? And then you can generally accurately predict what they're going to do, because once you recognize what their best interest is or what they believe it to be, then you know how they're going to act.
Sometimes when we look at how others choose to generally represent themselves through unique fashion, photos, and poses, we may just be right in the basis of our first impressions. Now the real trick is to know the intricacies of them more than just how they choose to present themselves. Number 3, notice their posture. Posture can reveal a lot about someone. Maybe they hold their head high because they've had a good day, or maybe they're slumping in their seat because they didn't quite get a full night's rest.
This is where I'll say posture is highly contextual. We talk about different cultures will present differently. What looks like confidence versus respect or shyness, all are going to look different based on what is culturally appropriate for how somebody presents themselves. There are also contextual factors where if someone's had a certain kind of day or just heard something, either great news or terrible news, that might alter their body language and may not provide a great baseline read for someone to know instantly what somebody's about. And so what I'll say in terms of body language is that when I've worked with a client for a few weeks, maybe a couple months, that's when I'll start to factor body language in more into my assessment in terms of I know what their baseline is, I understand how they generally present themselves, and so deviations from that are more informative for me rather than just, oh, they are folding their hands and so that means they're not interested in the session or they're not interested in talking. This is why I question the ability to read anyone instantly, is because generally it takes time for you to form an idea of how they normally present themselves, and then you look for deviations from that that might signal stress, deception, untrustworthiness, things like that. And so Robin Dreeke in this book actually talks about how you can speed up the timeline of getting to know someone and building longevity and familiarity with them. And they talk about more intense experiences, intentional activities that are spent together, and that can actually help you develop that relationship and understanding of somebody faster.
According to Judith Orloff, MD, notice if someone holds their head high in a manner of confidence, or maybe they have a strong ego and puff out their chest. Orloff also notes walking in an indecisive manner with your head low and cowered could be a sign of low self-esteem in some cases.
And so yeah, I think the language is very important in some cases. This is where just seeing a person in one moment in time may not be super helpful because you don't know what came right before. Maybe they just got back from getting an A on a paper and so their chest is puffed out and they look really confident, but maybe they're not always that way. Or maybe they just heard that their pet died and so they're slumped over and really upset looking. That's not how they always are necessarily.
Posture can reveal so much about how someone is feeling for the day. So keep an eye out. If they're falling asleep in their chair during class time, you don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to guess how tired they are. Number 4, notice what they're wearing. According to personality psychologist at the University of Texas, Sam Gosling, we should notice what people choose to tell us about their appearance. Gosling calls these signs identity claims, and they can include little things like what they wear, tattoos, bumper stickers, to even our screensaver. Gosling explains that identity claims are deliberate statements that we make about our attitude, goals, values, etc.
I think on the whole, looking at appearances can be helpful in this regard. The difficulty is I think I was reading on like the more extreme end of the spectrum with these FBI agents who are going after serial killers, terrorists, criminals, and the number of stories that Dr. O'Toole brings up, how neighbors thought, this one particular neighbor was just totally fine, completely normal based on what they wore, what kind of line of work they were in, and turned out to be serial killers in the end. I would hesitate to pin any one judgment of somebody of whether they're safe or whether they should be trusted just based on appearances alone. And so I think what we're gathering from this, both from the book and from this video, is that none of these things should stand in isolation. It shouldn't just be, oh, let me look at their clothing and decide whether they're trustworthy or not. Let me look at how they present themselves posturally and decide whether they are reliable workers or not. And so most of it does have to be put into context of all of these factors put together, helping you get a read on somebody. And again, it's not going to be super detailed. What Robin Dreeke talks about in his book is more about the business side of things, how much you can trust someone professionally. And Dr. O'Toole was more about safety, how you can know whether somebody is safe or trustworthy in a personal sense.
One of the things that are really important to keep in mind about identity claims is because these are deliberate, many people assume we are being manipulative with them and we're being disingenuous. But I think there's little evidence to suggest that that goes on. I think generally, people really do want to be known. They'll even do that at the expense of looking good. They'd rather be seen authentically than positively if it came down to that choice.
And the thing with clothing being intentional is that it can also be manipulated by somebody who has bad intentions. For those people who have bad intentions, they probably understand very well how wearing a clean-cut suit might offset any distrust that people have because they assume you're trustworthy, you're responsible. And so just to be aware that because it is so intentional, it can be manipulated as well.
So pay attention to what people want to convey about themselves. They're likely truthful to a good degree. Number 5, pay attention to their normal behavior and personality. Each of us has our own unique mannerisms and behaviors that reflect our personality. It's important to get a baseline for how someone acts before jumping to conclusions. If you notice someone is nervously tapping their foot at your party, does that mean they have something to hide? Or do they just not like parties? Or simply have a habit of tapping their foot?
And this is why I was really skeptical of the title Read Anyone Instantly. This point undergirds my whole skepticism about the video. Not that this is a bad video per se, I think all of these, again, in their proper places can help us form helpful judgments about people, whether to trust them in a professional, personal sense. But again, it's not going to be an instant thing. One of the things that Robin Dreeke talks about in his book is at least in a professional sense. And this goes personally too. If someone expresses and acts like they are vested in you, in that their destiny, if you will, or their destination is tied with yours. So if they want to see you succeed, and if you're seeing that they are saying and doing things to that effect, then that's generally a positive sign that you can trust them, at least as far as their own interest, because for that purpose and that context, their purposes and their best interest aligns with yours. And that's how you can actually predict that someone can be reliable, not generally necessarily, but maybe within your work, maybe within your academic career.
Once you get the baseline on their common behavior and personality, you'll have an easier time reading them when they deviate from their normal behavior. And number 6, look out for certain facial expressions. There are a few common facial expressions that can give way to what someone is really thinking or feeling. When someone's jaw is clenched and they grind their teeth, that can be a sign of tension. Someone may just be feeling bitter, angry, or contempt if their lips are pursed. Deep frown lines forming? You can bet they're definitely worried or overthinking. Want to know if someone is genuinely smiling in delight? Look for what is called a Duchenne smile. According to Healthline, this occurs when the zygomaticus major muscle lifts the corners of your mouth. At the same time, the orbicularis oculi muscles lift your cheeks and crinkle your eyes at the corners. It's the type of smile that reaches up to your eyes, causing those wrinkles known as crow's feet to appear. This type of smile appears when someone is genuinely happy.
Okay, again, this is probably gonna be culturally contextual as well, because there are gonna be some cultures that are more emotionally demonstrative and some that are more subdued. And so you might not get this full-on Duchenne smile that they're talking about. So if we're talking generally about like Western cultures and Americans specifically, we tend to be more out there with our emotions and our expressions. So that's probably fair to look at, but also recognize that a lot of these things could potentially be faked as well. Now, it's probably not as easy as it is with words. Again, people can be intentional about these things, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That sometimes in professional situations, you need to be cordial, respectful, and sometimes that's not how you're actually feeling. Does that mean that I'm disingenuous as a person or that I'm just trying to get along in the workplace? What I'm reading a lot about in this book is about reliability, that somebody's past actions help predict their future actions, especially their most recent actions, when we show them a little bit of trust in terms of, here's an assignment that I need you to do, how they handle that, how they handle the deadlines, the stresses, are they open to feedback, those kinds of things are all helpful predictors for someone being reliable and trustworthy, again, within that particular context in the future as well. So those kinds of actions and attitudes towards work, towards challenges and stressors are going to be helpful for being able to understand what a person's about, what drives them.
As opposed to a polite and kind smile, or even a forced smile. And there could even be an easier way to interpret different smiles. Cardiff University's Magdalena Reichlowska and her colleagues of researchers developed a classification of smiles and their effect on others with the help of a complex modeling program used in 2017. When you're giving positive feedback, you can often show what Reichlowska calls the reward smile. This is when your lips are naturally pulled directly upwards and eyebrows lift, and you form small dimples at the sides of your mouth. The dominant smile communicates friendship and liking. This includes pressing your lips together along with the appearance of the small dimples. Lastly, the dominant smile is when your upper lip is raised. You wrinkle your nose and your cheeks get pushed upwards while smiling. During this smile, you raise your upper lids, and you sort of sneer with the indentation between your nose and mouth naturally deepening. So if you happen to notice someone you've been recently talking to using the dominant smile, they may just be trying to be your friend. Unless they're smiling in their sleep. Then maybe they're just really tired and having a good dream. So, do you think you'll be able to read others better now with a bit of practice? Are you the next Sherlock Holmes in the making? Tell us in the comments section down below.
Okay, so the facial expressions thing, when they were talking about the smile, that's actually really fascinating stuff, that you have these different categorizations and classifications for different kinds of smile and how we maybe naturally use different smiles for different purposes without ever intentionally doing so. Again, I would put that into the larger context of their past behavior and their recent behavior. So if someone is showing that dominance smile, but they check all the other boxes in terms of communicating that they're vested in you and your success, they've showed that through their actions and actually going to bat on your behalf, as well as having a history of reliability, then I'd say maybe that doesn't have to worry me so much. Maybe that's just how they smile, and not have to read into that too much as, are they trying to be superior or sneer at me? But take their track record of behavior and speech into account as well. And likewise, maybe there's somebody who's just very good at faking a nice smile, and then it would be important for me to consider their track record of behavior in the other direction as well. Have they been reliable in the past? Are they showing that they're vested in my success, or are they just about their own? And so a lot of these things can't stand by themselves. It's a fascinating look into some of the things that I've kind of unconsciously picked up through my time working with a lot of different kinds of people. And now I can more so put into words, both through this video and through these books, what I was looking for. And that's super helpful also to be able to recognize, hey, this is what's kind of setting me off about this person. Why don't I think they're so trustworthy? Why am I having this read of this person? And again, sorting through whether it's my first impressions based on what they're wearing or how they present themselves, or am I actually drawing a conclusion based on the information that I'm gathering from what they're wearing, what they're saying, and what they're doing. So yeah, really fascinating video. I'd be interested in diving more into some of Psych2Go's stuff. Some of the topics seem to be really out of left field, but I'm definitely interested in diving more into that. So do comment below what you think about some of these suggestions, as well as about this channel particularly. So I look forward to hearing your feedback. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all next time.